Hello, glad to see you on the channel. Subscribe, give a like, and don't forget to leave a comment. Enjoy watching.
She didn't even look up when I walked in. That told me everything I needed to know before she opened her mouth. The office was cold, clinical, full of frosted glass and steel edges, exactly the kind of place that makes you feel like a temporary guest in your own story. Amanda Kerrigan sat behind her desk like a character in a tech commercial, sleek, poised, with that deliberate stillness people mistake for power. Her hair was tied back, so tight it looked like it hurt. And her voice, flat as day-old soda, carried just enough fake sympathy to qualify as professional. "Ray," she said, finally raising her eyes like she was deciding whether to throw out a sandwich. "You've been with the company a long time, and we respect that." Which is always how they start it, isn't it? With respect. Respect just before the blade. I nodded. I didn't sit. I'd learned that trick to stay standing, make it fast, keep your dignity in one piece. 15 years, I said. For CTOs, 3 rebrands, 2 acquisitions, and 1 fire that wasn't my fault. She blinked. No smile. No acknowledgement. She didn't get the joke, which made sense. People like Amanda don't know what it's like to work on servers that hum like they're about to die. She'd never stayed up for 48 hours during a crisis migration, eating cold pizza with guys who haven't seen sunlight in a week. She was born into the corner office. Grew up in the building. Literally, Carl Kerrigan, the founder, used to bring her in as a kid when I was just starting out. She'd color on whiteboards while we debugged security patches. "You're a legacy employee," she said, and there it was. Her tone sharpened, the smile vanished, and the mask came off. "But the company is moving forward. We don't need history anymore. We need innovation." That line stuck in the air like a fart in an elevator. I stared at her for a long second. There's something about watching a child, who used to hand you drawings with crayon-scribbled dogs, now sit in judgment of your worth like some undercooked executive Buddha. And honestly, for a second, I felt sorry for her. She thought she was making a tough decision. Thought she was cutting out the old rot. Except I wasn't rot. I was the damn support beam. "Well," I said, nodding slowly, "good luck with that." I turned. Didn't slam the door. Didn't make a scene. That would have given her too much. She wanted drama, a meltdown, a moment she could point to later and say, "See? That's why he had to go." But I've seen too many good people burn out in that building to waste my breath on noise. I just left. It wasn't until I got to the parking lot that the weight hit me. The badge wouldn't scan anymore. Someone had already deactivated it. No exit interview. No handshake. 15 years, and I was deleted like an expired log file. I sat in my car, let the silence wrap around me like a wet blanket. I watched the office building, a place I knew better than my own house, glow under fluorescent lighting. The new generation was inside, fresh faces with degrees I helped fund by working late shifts and skipping vacations. They didn't know my name. Didn't care. Amanda made sure of that. 2 days later, I got the email. Subject line: "What did she do?" All caps. From Carl Kerrigan himself. The founder. The man who once told me I was the backbone of his company. And now he wanted to know what the hell just happened. "Let me ask you something real quick. What would you do if your bosses could pull the plug on your whole career like it was just cleaning out old files? Would you go quietly? Or would you remind them what happens when the guy who knows where all the wires are buried finally flips a switch?" Because I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't even call HR. But I had something Amanda didn't. I had time. I had knowledge. And more importantly, I had receipts. So yeah, I read that email from Carl with a quiet little chuckle. What did she do? Buddy, you're asking the wrong question. The real one is, what am I about to do next? Because Amanda thinks she cleaned house. But she forgot one thing. Sometimes, the history you throw away was the only thing keeping the whole system from crashing. And now? Now I had nothing but time. Let's see how innovative she really is. They never really saw me, not the real me, not the guy who used to sleep under his desk during rollouts because the servers couldn't be trusted to behave overnight. Not the man who missed his wedding anniversary 3 years in a row so product deadlines could be met and executives could give confident speeches about agility and resilience at tech conferences. They only ever saw the silhouette of someone who showed up, fixed things, and didn't ask for credit afterward. The truth is, when you stay too long in one place, especially in tech, they stop seeing you as a person and start seeing you as furniture. You become the server rack in the back room, the old printer no one wants to replace because it still works, even if it screeches like a dying animal every time it's used. Reliable, invisible, and ultimately disposable. But let's rewind a bit. The early days? They were something else. I was there when we had 3 folding tables in a warehouse space with a mouse infestation and a dream of building the next big B2B logistics platform, whatever the hell that meant at the time. I wrote the first line of production code while Carl Kerrigan was still ordering Ethernet cables off eBay and swearing about shipping delays. We built that architecture from scratch, no templates, no Stack Overflow cheat sheets, just raw logic, caffeine, and sheer will. I still remember patching the back end at 4 in the morning while my daughter was being born 2 states away. I wasn't there, but my code was. Somehow that always felt backwards. I trained half the people who now make more money than I ever will. There's a guy named Brian Kessler who used to follow me around like a golden retriever, asking questions about packet flow and RESTful APIs. I taught him how to write clean, efficient code and how to troubleshoot blind. He once called me Yoda with a mortgage. Now he's a VP with a Tesla and a LinkedIn page that reads like a eulogy for humility. He doesn't return my calls. That's the thing about being good in silence. No one remembers you made the noise stop. They just remember the quiet that came after. It was about a week after Amanda fired me that I started poking around the old cloud storage archive. Not maliciously, not at first. Mostly curiosity. I still had access to some dev mirrors, ghosts of past builds that hadn't been properly cleaned up. That was one of my final projects, actually, transitioning our backend from on-prem to hybrid cloud. I designed the infrastructure, wrote the protocol documentation, trained the offshore teams, and got a mug with a typo in my name as thanks. Buried in a permissions folder was a directory labeled vendor_review_Q4. It was supposed to be part of a product audit, something Amanda had led when she was still just head of innovation, instead of the princess on the throne. I clicked through out of habit. The folders were sloppily organized, classic executive structure, all presentation and no architecture. But inside one subfolder was a set of emails. And one of those emails stopped me cold. It was a chain between Amanda and a third-party vendor called Verigenix Systems. I remembered them. They were brought in to accelerate development for our new AI-powered supply chain prediction module. That was supposed to be Amanda's big break, her visionary moment. Except in the email, Amanda was explicitly referencing chunks of code that looked disturbingly like our proprietary build. My build. She wasn't asking them to help create something from scratch. She was sending them line-by-line functional logic from our legacy system and asking them to repackage it with modern wrappers for demo purposes. It was like finding out someone had spray-painted a new label on your engine and claimed they built the car. Except in our case, that engine was covered by intellectual property protections, not that she seemed to care. It wasn't just unethical. It might have been flat-out illegal. I read the thread 3 times, slowly, carefully. Forwarded it to myself using a private Proton mail I'd set up years ago for dealing with freelance side gigs. Then I copied the entire directory to a USB drive, a solid-state little bullet-sized thing I'd gotten at a trade show. I encrypted the folder, locked the drive in a fireproof box I used for tax documents, and tucked the whole thing under the false bottom of my bedroom dresser drawer. I didn't know what I was going to do with it yet, but I knew one thing. If I ever needed proof that this company had lost its soul, I now had it in spades. It was like staring into a mirror that showed you not what you are, but what they really thought of you. They didn't care if I built the framework that kept our uptime at 99.9%. They didn't care if I knew the network's load tolerance by heart or that I could reboot 3 environments blindfolded. They wanted sleek decks, bold buzzwords, and people who could sell an idea before it even existed. And if they had to step on 15 years of loyalty to get there, so be it. Amanda had rewritten the rules. No more respect for the legacy builders. No more acknowledgement of the foundation we poured with our blood and burnout. But she also made a mistake, and I don't think she realized it yet. Because while she was busy posing for Forbes articles and polishing off someone else's code, she'd forgotten one important truth. The past doesn't stay buried just because you delete the name of the guy who wrote it. And if she thought legacy was trash, then she should have double-checked which dumpster she left it in. Some of us don't go quietly. Some of us wait. And we remember. I didn't have to do anything. Not really. Because the system was already rigged to fail without me. The truth is, I never built anything to be flashy or pretty or pitch deck perfect. I built it to run, to work, to keep going even when every shiny new idea collapsed under its own weight. My code wasn't elegant, but it was bulletproof. It had bandages in the right places and duct tape where no one ever looked, and that's what made it strong. It worked because I knew where the pressure points were, and I reinforced them quietly, like any good old engineer does when no one's looking. So when I heard that Amanda's innovation update was finally going live, I didn't flinch. I didn't wince. I sat back, opened a cold beer, and waited. Because I already knew what was going to happen. I'd seen the code audits, the dependency charts, and the overconfident declarations about deprecating legacy logic that made the damn engine run in the first place. Amanda and her new developer team, all fresh-faced and filled with startup gospel, had ripped out entire layers of stability like weeds in a garden without ever checking which ones held the dirt together. The quarterly update launched on a Wednesday morning with a press release so smug I could practically smell the cologne off the page. Phrases like next-gen integration and modernized back-end infrastructure floated around like confetti, masking the fact that no one on the current tech team really understood how the API load balancing had worked since 2017. That was my patchwork. That was my ghost in the server. By lunchtime, the client dashboards were stalling. By 2 o'clock, internal ticketing started filling up with critical errors. By dinner, the entire product environment was crashing in cascading waves of failure, each outage triggering another like dominoes falling on a sinking ship. They called it a load issue at first, then unexpected behavior under high demand, which is corporate speak for, we broke something and we don't know what. And I watched it all happen from the comfort of my couch, with a laptop on my knees and a grin I hadn't felt in months. It wasn't glee, not exactly, it was justice. It was proof that my work had mattered, that the invisible scaffolding I'd spent years perfecting wasn't just busy work from an old dog, but essential, irreplaceable architecture that couldn't be hot-swapped with flashy slide decks and buzzwords. Then came the calls. Not from the company, of course. They'd burned that bridge, salted the earth, and put up a parking lot where my name used to be. But from clients. Old ones. Smart ones. The ones who remembered me, not because of my title, but because I fixed problems when no one else could. A procurement manager from Deltacon Shipping, someone I hadn't spoken to in 2 years, reached out through LinkedIn with a polite but desperate, "Hey, Ray, are you still consulting?" That word made me pause. Consulting. I'd never worn the title before. I'd always been the guy behind the scenes, the permanent fixture. But suddenly it felt different. I didn't belong to anyone anymore. I wasn't bound to Carl or Amanda or any of their cronies. I was a free agent with keys to every broken door they didn't know existed. So I said yes. Set up a Gmail with a neutral name. Bought a domain, registered a tiny LLC, nothing flashy, just enough to look clean and competent. I called it Blackwire Solutions, which sounded cool enough to be legit but vague enough to dodge attention. Within 48 hours, I had 5 calls booked with clients trying to figure out why their systems were falling apart after the update. They weren't looking for revolution, they were looking for reliability. And that's what I gave them. In one case, I reinstalled a cron job that Amanda's team had proudly removed as obsolete, which was actually the glue holding a weekly inventory sync together across 5 regional hubs. In another, I restored an access token system they deprecated without testing the fallback. These were not sexy fixes. No one was writing Medium posts about them. But they worked. Word got around. Quietly, but quickly. Meanwhile, back at the mothership, things were not going well. I had a friend still on the inside, a quiet QA lead named Marcus who'd survived 3 layoffs by virtue of his invisibility, and he fed me little updates through Signal. According to him, Amanda had called 3 emergency all-hands meetings in 2 days, and people were quitting mid-shift. He said her face looked like glass cracking under pressure, all polished and perfect on the outside, but one good tap away from collapse. And here's the kicker, no one knew where the problems were coming from. Because it wasn't sabotage. I hadn't touched a line of their new code. I hadn't deployed anything malicious or planted any bombs. I didn't have to. All I did was walk away and let gravity do its thing. They'd built on bones they didn't understand. They'd removed my scripts, thinking they were clutter, not realizing they were the only reason the system didn't eat itself every 3 weeks. Amanda, with her MBA confidence and visionary PowerPoints, was now knee-deep in the mud she refused to believe existed. And me? I was just a ghost in the server. Clients were happy. Word was spreading. I wasn't chasing revenge anymore. I was building something new out of the rubble they left behind. Something leaner, cleaner, and mine. But I wasn't done yet. Because somewhere in all that chaos, I realized something dangerous. When you're invisible long enough, you learn how to move without being seen. And when they finally notice you, it's already too late. There's a difference between revenge and revelation, though from the outside, they often look the same. One is fueled by bitterness, the other by the simple truth finally getting its day in the sun. I never set out to destroy Amanda Kerrigan or burn her world to the ground. Frankly, she was doing a pretty damn good job of that all by herself. But when people pretend long enough that your work never mattered, that your years were just a phase in their timeline, a footnote in their highlight reel, there's a point where silence starts to feel like complicity. And I've never been great at letting things slide once the line's been crossed. The email sat in my drafts folder for 3 days before I had sent. I'd written it in one long sitting, no edits, no filters, just a quiet download of facts, timelines, and context. I didn't embellish a word, didn't add drama or spin. I didn't need to. The truth was explosive enough. At the bottom of the message, I attached 3 PDFs, one with the email chain between Amanda and the Verigenix vendor, one with metadata logs proving the proprietary logic had been lifted from our legacy build, and one, a cherry on top, showing that Amanda had backdated a commit to cover her tracks during the review process. The journalist I sent it to wasn't just some blogger with a loud Twitter feed. His name was Alex Ranford, and he had a reputation for doing deep dives that left scorched earth behind. He didn't do rumors. He didn't chase headlines. He only ran stories when the receipts were airtight and the impact was real. I knew his work because I'd read his expose on a different tech firm the year before, one that ended with 2 executives indicted and an IPO pulled the night before trading. I knew, the moment I clicked send, that I wasn't just lighting a match. I was handing it to a guy who knew how to build a bonfire. The timing, as fate would have it, could not have been better or worse, depending on who you ask. Amanda had scheduled a live stream launch event for that same Thursday afternoon. It was her big moment, the full-court press to distract from the bugs and outages and shrinking customer trust. The internal memo said she'd be unveiling the company's new direction, complete with an interactive demo of the AI supply chain suite she'd supposedly championed from concept to execution. The same suite, of course, that was stitched together with stolen logic, plagiarized wrappers, and a back-end as stable as a drunk tightrope walker in a wind tunnel. At 1:30 p.m., she took the stage in a sleek white blazer, the kind you wear when you want to look like a disruptor without actually doing the disrupting yourself. The company had spared no expense, crisp lighting, a cleaned UI, perfectly timed slides. She smiled into the camera like nothing was burning beneath her, like she didn't hear the alarms. By 2:05, the article hit the wire. I watched it unfold in real time, sitting in a corner booth at a greasy diner that served bottomless coffee and didn't care how long you stayed. The headline was simple, surgical. Startup's flagship code may be plagiarized. Internal emails suggest executive complicity. The body of the article was 10 paragraphs of devastating calm, walking readers through every piece of evidence I had sent. There were screenshots, quotes, and expert opinions sprinkled in for good measure. And the kicker? It went viral within 15 minutes. Amanda was still answering softball questions from some tech influencer on the live stream when someone, probably her comms director, rushed the stage with a tablet. I'll give her this much. She didn't flinch right away. She kept talking for another 60 seconds, even as her smile turned waxy and her voice started cracking at the edges. Then, mid-sentence, the feed cut out. Just a hard black screen and the company's logo, spinning like a nervous eye. By 3:30, the investor call started. I didn't hear them, of course, but Marcus did. My guy on the inside said Amanda's phone was lighting up like a Christmas tree in a house fire. Half the VC board pulled out by sundown. Legal was called in by dinner. What happened next wasn't so much a fall as a free fall. They issued a statement, tepid, full of nothing, and promised a thorough internal review, which in this world means we're looking for someone to blame who isn't us. That someone, naturally, was Amanda. By Friday morning, the company had placed her on administrative leave, which is the corporate equivalent of shoving someone out the airlock and pretending it's for their safety. Her name was stripped from the company website by noon. Employees got a terse internal message about organizational changes. And just like that, she was out. Just like that, the same golden girl who'd told me to my face that history doesn't matter anymore was being erased from the history she tried to rewrite. But don't get me wrong, I didn't celebrate. I didn't dance or pop a bottle or post fake tweets with inside jokes. Because it wasn't fun. It wasn't satisfying the way revenge stories pretend it is. It just felt necessary. Like taking out the trash that someone else had been pretending didn't smell. I knew Carl had seen the article. He hadn't emailed since his original "What did she do?" message, but I could imagine the look on his face. The weight of realizing that the daughter he'd groomed to take over had tried to fast-track her glory by stealing the bones of someone else's work. My work. The guy he once told would always have a place here. Well, Carl, I found my place. It just happened to be on the outside, holding the matches, watching the whole damn thing catch fire. And the best part? I still hadn't said a word in public. Because sometimes, the loudest thing you can do is let the truth speak without your name attached. It took 3 days after the article detonated for the official resignation to hit the wires, wrapped in the usual padded corporate language. All that we appreciate her leadership during a period of growth, and she has decided to pursue other opportunities, kind of nonsense. The kind of words you use when someone's been ejected from a flaming plane, but you're still trying to act like they landed on purpose. Amanda Kerrigan was done. Her reign, her legacy, her sleek press photos and buzzword symphonies, all reduced to a digital footnote and a Google result that would follow her longer than her last name ever could. And then came the email. This one wasn't in all caps, which told me a lot before I even opened it. It was from Carl himself, old Carl, the man who once shook my hand in a server room and said, "If this thing ever works, it's because of guys like you." The subject line was just 2 words. Let's talk. The body was shorter than I expected. No apologies. No explanations. Just a date, a time, and a location, the corner office on the 23rd floor that I hadn't seen since Amanda sent me packing. I stared at it for a long time, sipping cold coffee in the silence of my kitchen, wondering what tone he'd take. Regret? Blame? Desperation? Maybe all 3. I put on a shirt that still held a little starch, one I hadn't worn since my last in-person client pitch. I didn't do it for him. I did it for me, to remind myself that I was walking in as someone with nothing to lose and nothing to prove. I didn't bring a laptop, no device, no tablet. Just a manila folder with 3 pieces of paper inside, all printed in black and white, no color, no flair. I wanted him to hold the weight of the truth in his hand, not skim it on a screen between bites of catered sushi. The receptionist recognized me but didn't say a word, just buzzed me in like I was still an employee with full clearance. That was funny. I passed 2 marketing interns on the way to the elevator who didn't even glance up from their phones, and as I stepped into the glass box and watched the floors rise beneath me, I remembered all the times I'd come up here to fix someone else's mess, always quiet, always calm, always unseen. Carl was waiting with that old-school executive posture, leaning back in his chair like a retired general surveying a battlefield he couldn't quite control anymore. His hair had gone whiter since I'd last seen him in person, and his voice had picked up a hoarseness that came from too many late-night calls and not enough sleep. "Ray," he said, nodding like we were still friends, like none of the in-between had happened. "Appreciate you coming." I didn't sit. I reached into my bag, pulled out the manila folder, and slid it across the desk toward him. He didn't open it right away. Just stared at it like he already knew what was inside, like he'd seen the ripples and now wanted to touch the stone. "This is how you treat loyalty?" I asked, not angry, just tired in that way only long memories can make you. 15 years of building something that worked, something that kept your lights on, and I got tossed like a broken mouse. No handshake. No exit interview. Just her telling me I wasn't the future. Carl didn't answer immediately, which was probably the first smart thing he'd done in years. He ran a finger along the edge of the folder, not opening it, just feeling its weight. When he did speak, his voice was lower than I remembered, full of gravel and something that might have been shame. "I didn't know how deep she was in," he said, almost to himself. "I should have watched closer." "No," I said, because I wasn't going to let him get away with that. "You didn't want to know. That's the difference. You wanted the story, the next-gen prodigy, the smart, bold daughter with the big ideas. You thought she'd be your legacy." He flinched at that word, legacy, like it had turned radioactive in his ears. I almost smiled, but it wasn't the kind of moment that earned one. I stood there for another few seconds, watching him try to find a response that wouldn't make things worse. And then he reached into his drawer, pulled out a white envelope, and pushed it toward me like a peace offering made of paper and gilt. "This is a buyout," he said. "Generous terms. NDA included." I didn't touch it. "Carl," I said, voice low and even, "I'm not for sale." He blinked, clearly not used to that kind of answer. But what could he say? I had no stake in their redemption anymore. No stock. No reputation to defend. They'd written me off already, and I'd made peace with that. What I had now was better. My name, my clients, my work, All mine. I just wanted you to see the folder, I said, tapping it gently once before turning to go. You need to know what kind of fire you handed your company to. Whether you want to rebuild or not, that's on you. But don't ever confuse being old with being obsolete. He didn't say a word as I walked out. And as the elevator carried me back down, floor by floor, I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel like a hero walking off into the sunset. I felt clean, done, like someone who'd finally filed the last report, archived the last backup, and pulled the plug on something that had long since stopped serving anyone. I stepped out onto the street with nothing in my hands but a thin folder of memories and a future I finally got to write myself. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like the good employee. I felt like the man who finally remembered what he was worth.